You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we're talking about King Kong versus Godzilla. The most colossal conflict the screen has ever known. The monster battle of the century, together for the first time in a colossal clash for all time. Here we go. Welcome back to the Fan2Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me, as always, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau. And on a previous episode, Pete and I talked about our first watches, our impressions of the 1933 classic King Kong, and how that movie was, a bit old when we watched it growing up, but at the same time still made an impression, part of those monster movie marathons.
The beasts are coming. They're hungry, they're angry, and they're out of control. 4 beastly movies. King Kong, Cat People, Piranha 2, The Spawning, and the biggest beast of all, John Belushi in Animal House. The Beasts Are Coming, beginning Tuesday night at 7 on Channel 9.
And looking at the movie now with a few more years in our respective rearview mirrors, we can see the movie for its themes and its place in the 1930s, around the time of the Great Depression. The things that it said, maybe unconsciously, but certainly were part of its DNA as a product of its time. And while you can't help but be enamored and respectful of how pioneering that movie was in its special effects, in its cultural impact, if you've listened to just about any episode of the podcast, Pete and I make it very obvious that we are products of the 80s, and we grew up with a lot of these movies like Indiana Jones and Star Wars that certainly shaped our childhoods. The cartoons we watched on Saturday mornings, the movies we watched on Saturday afternoon matinees, the movies we would try to sneak into by getting a random stranger in front of us to pretend to be our uncle and buy us a movie ticket so we could see something that our parents probably did not want us watching at the time. And when we think about King Kong, much love for 1933, but there is a special place in my heart for a different era of Godzilla. And I think, Pete, you may share this sentiment. I always just kind of jump to the kaiju Toho era with King Kong versus Godzilla.
Friday afternoon at 1, a submarine collides with an iceberg, and guess who's released? Yes, Godzilla. Once again, the fate of Tokyo is in question, and only one thing can stop him from destroying the entire city. King Kong. Watch these two beasts battle it out. Has Godzilla met his match? Will King Kong go out on a limb to save Tokyo? Place your bets on the grudge match of the year. King Kong versus Godzilla. A special presentation. Friday afternoon at 1 on Channel 9.
Godzilla comes out in 1954, defines what giant monster movies are going to be. We get the introduction of like kaijus, we get monsters versus monsters. That's King Kong versus Godzilla in 1962. And I had to look up, how did Kong and Godzilla cross paths? And what I found is that at the time, there were a lot of fragmented legal issues regarding like who actually owned King Kong between RK Post Pictures, different creators, different estates, and different studios. And by the late 50s, since there were actually like no plans to keep making another Kong movie at that time, they were satisfied with the original Kong and then Son of Kong. RKO was willing to license Kong on a limited film by film basis. And then that's when Toho stepped in. They thought that that would help bring like international legitimacy to Godzilla by pairing him with what at the time now was already like a Western like icon, and that they start moving away from the stop motion from the 1933 to the man in suit stuff that we kind of largely grew up on when we were watching Godzilla films.
It's Godzilla!
And that's the one where increased the size of Kong, because in the original one,
it took a lot of liberties to make that an even matchup.
Exactly. Yeah. I think so. If he's 30 feet tall in the original, now he's 150 feet, so that you can get the like kaiju on a kaiju fight, and you can make them an even match and have them like stop a small scale miniature city.
Isn't he like powered up through electricity in that one too?
Godzilla is roasting King Kong.
Electrical storm up ahead of us, sir.
Lightning bolts. Kong has a chance. Electricity makes him stronger. Now watch.
Electricity makes him stronger?
Uh-huh.
It's still like hard to fight atomic breath, but they at least sized them up to at least like have a fighting chance against Godzilla. And if I remember, like at the end, King Kong wins, but I guess there's another version where you could hear the King Kong roar followed by the Godzilla roar after that.
That was an urban legend.
Okay.
Because I was hyper focused on this because there was a book I took out of the library in the 80s that is like one of those famous ones at the time. It was like the orange hardcover. There was a series of them on different monsters. There was one on Godzilla, and it said like at the end of King Kong versus Godzilla, King Kong wins in the American version. In the Japanese version, Godzilla wins. And for years, this was taken as gospel. In fact,
it's in a book in the library, Pete. Of course it is.
Of course it is. Yeah. Well, how could words steer you wrong? Turns out they can. But apparently that there's only one version. I don't know about like the Godzilla roar being added in or not. I just know that there's no like second version. Like there's no Japanese version where Godzilla wins. It makes for a nice story. It makes for, I guess, good sleuthing for people to try and find a copy of something that doesn't exist. But apparently it does not exist because it was never made. I was pissed. And I mean, I have tremendous sympathy for King Kong in the original, but because the suit was so goofy looking, to pit him up against Godzilla, that I was a huge fan of. I'm rooting for Godzilla all day, every day, and so I was really pissed off at the end of that movie.
Well, the good thing is, Pete, you just had to wait a few more years, 5 to be exact, 62 to 67, before you were alive, for that matter, before you got King Kong Escapes.
The mightiest monster of all time in his greatest adventure, King Kong Escapes. Can the sinister Doctor Who enslave King Kong's fantastic strength? Can King Kong defy the might of modern artillery, tanks, missiles? See King Kong battle primordial monsters, an air armada, submarines, and finally see King Kong battle man's most evil creation, a robot Kong of steel. In the battle of the century. All new. More fantastic than ever. King Kong Escapes, thrilling in Technicolor.
More sci-fi elements. You get Mechanic Kong. This is right before the 76 movie. Kong has had a few movies. Godzilla has had a few movies. I think people are comfortable with giant monster type movies. Again, I'm going back to 1933. That would have been the exception. I've never seen this before. This is right. I'm watching Top Hat and bringing up Baby. Wait, there's a giant ape? This is nuts. Unbelievable. And now there's a Godzilla film seemingly like every other week, and he's fighting a different type of monster, and they're goofy, but they're fun. King Kong back on the scene. Totally makes sense. Right before 1976's King Kong.
Kong! Kong! King Kong!
Don't call.
Yeah, let him go.
But he's going.
He's going home. I think he's had enough of what we call civilization.